My name is Taetro. I'm a music maker and a teacher. Today, we're going to be opening up the DAW Ableton Live and start to take some of the first steps in understanding this software and eventually making our own music. I'm using a Mac. Some things might look a little bit different for you, and I might also refer to some key commands along the way where I say Command Z or Command T. If you're a Windows user, Command equals Control for you. All right, so we've opened up our project here. We're going to be working exclusively in arrangement view. You can always get back there by navigating up here in the top right or by pressing tab on your keyboard. We have MIDI tracks and audio tracks. If you look for audio tracks, most of our percussion down here are actually audio tracks, and you can see the audio waveform. And if we click on this clip here, we will see the audio displayed down here in the bottom. We have the ability to look at our actual clip, what's in the clip, or we have the ability to look at audio effects and devices, which there's not much there now. But just know, if you're ever not seeing the contents of the clip, you have the ability to switch it by clicking down here in this window and getting a better view. And then we also have a few MIDI tracks, the other type of track available to us in Ableton Live. MIDI tracks are what we use to create virtual instruments and virtual drums, instruments that we can control with our MIDI keyboard. An instant way to tell if a track is audio or MIDI is it will either have a little note icon there, or it will just be a plain old circle. The plain old circle, those are audio tracks. And instead of seeing audio, we're actually seeing notes, individual notes that I'm just clicking and dragging and highlighting each individual note here. And let's look at the notes here in this clip, because here we're going to be able to really refine and see where these notes are landing. You're going to notice this grid has a few more numbers on it now. We have 1, then 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Every set of 4 is a bar. So that's kind of how we quantify music time-wise. And that's what these labels at the top here mean. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 3, 4. So this is bar 1, beat 1. Then we have bar 1, beat 2, bar 1, beat 3, bar 1, beat 4. As we progress along, you'll notice that every bar, if we go all the way to the end or even somewhere in the middle, bar 12 has bar 12, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. And each of these individual grid lines represents a subdivision, closer magnification of sound and rhythm. If I right-click in this window, I can change this grid. So if for some reason you're not seeing the same grid as me, you can change it to specifically be quarter notes. Quarter notes are 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're dividing the bar into quarters. Then you can go ahead and further divide it into eighth notes. That's our upbeats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then so on and so forth. And there's also an adaptive grid that will change depending on your magnification. So you have that option. That's important because whether we're playing in notes or whether we're drawing them in on the grid, which is a possibility here, simply by double clicking, let's say in this lane, our kick, we've just entered in a kick there. Let's double click and enter another one and another one. Suddenly we're messing with this beat and we're able to even make it our own and make different patterns. We can use our MIDI controller to control them. So if I now arm this main drum rack MIDI by pressing the little tiny music note here and making it red, well, I should have control on my MIDI controller. So if we open this up, you'll see we have different categories of different instruments. Let's try to quickly add a piano to this project. Let's drop in this grand piano, and I'm going to click and drag it in this empty space where it says drop files here. And now we can play a piano sound. But finally, how do we record? Well, let's zoom out on our project and let's play with these little brackets here. Let's move them to bar 26 where our track has ended. And let's stretch them across, let's say a 2-bar length. So here we have the loop switch, meaning we'll loop inside this region that we've selected. And then these 2 buttons here are punch in and punch out switches. These tell Ableton Live to not record anything before or after these 2 flags here, these in and out points. Let's give this a try. We're going to toggle on MIDI arrangement overdub so that instead of creating a new loop every single time we cycle through. It's just going to continually add notes. So I'm going to press record. We're going to get a 4-beat count in, just like in the Melodics app, and then we can record our 2-bar loop. And now it has recorded. Looks like I need to pay a little more attention in my Melodics rhythm lessons because my rhythm was a bit off. In the first lesson, we're going to start by learning about drums. First, we'll by default be in performance mode. This is the mode that will help us progress through the lesson. This is the mode that will be scored on in Melodics. If we're struggling at all during this process, we can switch over to practice mode. Practice mode gives us the ability to slow down the BPM if we're having a little bit of trouble. But if you remember, we can move the notes, essentially fixing some of our rhythms. Let's just experiment with creating a melody, 2-bar melody on top of this, and let's just record a simple 3-note melody. Let's go G, G, E, D. Let's hit record, get that 1-bar count in. And now we've recorded that melody. So if you notice, all of these cool, different bright colors over here on the right represent our different tracks. Each track has a number. They are numbered here in yellow, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 12 here in this project. And each individual track, these horizontal lanes with the settings right here, each of them have their own individual settings. For instance, if I go down to the main drum rack MIDI, I can turn off the main drum rack by pressing that yellow button. I can turn them back on, clicking again. I can solo this track by pressing the S. And that goes for any of these tracks. Instead of just outright muting the drums, let's bring them down volume-wise, just clicking and dragging down. And let's fade them up, clicking and dragging up. We should never go beyond 0, actually. We never want to push this up above 0, whereas we're seeing 1 all the way up to 6. So let's go ahead and solo our melody. And let's move this center parameter to our right ear and to our left ear. And if you're like me in this moment, you realize that you're wearing your headphones on backwards. Finally, as you go through and experiment inside the DAW, if you're ever curious what something does or what something is, there's a window here in the bottom left that can be toggled on and off, that if you hover over any given item in the DAW, it will tell you what that item is. So get used to navigating around Ableton Live, soloing tracks. You can play with the mix of this track. You can play with looping different regions. Now you know how these loop brackets work. You can play with changing different notes in different clips, and you can even record your own ideas. For now, great work.